Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Thursday, June the 6th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, David Williams. He's produced the program. We're looking forward to speaking with you on a topic of your choosing this morning. So, if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. which is 8626. So, huge day for sports fans right across the country. Opening day of the CFL, the Canadian Football League, the defending Grey Cup champions Montreal Alouette take on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I know very few people in this province follow the CFL. Oh, I think that's the case. But when we lived out west, it was hugely popular. Just about all of my sporting buddies who were from Western Canada, big CFL fans, but anyway, opening day. And a reminder for those volleyball fans out there, of which there are plenty in this province, Nations League action again today. Canada takes on Argentina. That's world number 10 versus world number 8. And what were you doing when you were 17? Well, I'll tell you what Mira Andreev was doing, was getting a spot in the semi-finals at the French Open. She's the youngest player on the female side to be in a Grand Slam major since I believe it was 1996, and Martina Hingis completed that feat. So pretty interesting stuff. Some great matchups in the semis for tennis fans. On the ladies' side, of course, Andreeva will take on Paulini, but it's Iga Swiatek taking on Coco Gauff, which is a really delicious matchup. And on the men's side, the rivalry that the men's tennis really needs. Carlos Alcaraz versus Yannick Sinner, one of the matchups on the men's side. Okay, sticking with France on a much more solemn note. It was on this date, June 6th, Operation Neptune unfolded, of course, most often referred to as D-Day. So there's some 13 Canadian veterans apparently in Normandy for the commemorations today. There's also a Canadian receiving France's highest honour today in Vancouver, a guy named Joseph Vogelsang getting the Knight of the Legion of Honour from the French government. So there's a lot to discuss inside of D-Day, of course, and the Germans under the command of Field Marshal Rommel, the Allies under the command of American General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and we know the stories of the losses. But the lead up to D-Day is fascinating military history. Plans were developed in the middle of 1943 and, of course, eventually launched on June the 6th. There was all sorts of attempts at deception to deceive the Germans as to where and when this largest seaborne invasion in history would take place. And, of course, it took place on this date. So there was 5 juts of sand, 5 sectors on the Normandy beaches, whether that be at Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. There were some 24,000 members of the Allied troops, American, British, and Canadian airborne troops in particular. But it was a naval bombardment, airborne, and of course the soldiers who came from those carriers and just stormed into what was unbelievable fire from the German gun emplacements, and of course the barbed wire and the metal tripods. Losses that day on the Allied side are over 4,400, 10,000 casualties. They didn't manage to link up all 5 sectors of the Normandy beach until 6 days later, and then of course it took them until the 21st of this month to see some of the villages taken back. And it began to the end of the Nazi tyranny in Western Europe, and of course the stranglehold on France, the beginning of the liberation of that country. And commemorations taking place today, of course, in Normandy with some of the notables on hand. And it's nice to see some of those veterans be able to attend. I mean, I think I read that one of them was as old as 107. And of course, it won't be long before there are no veterans left from the Second World War. So D-Day and any thoughts on it, we're happy to have that conversation today. I think it can lead into some World War I kind of commentary regarding the remains of the unknown soldier. I continue to get emails with questions, no real massive concerns or consternation, but some questions about how it was handled and what the process is going to look like, and maybe the thoughts that maybe a few extra days of the remains lying in state in the foyer of the Confederation building, and we can talk about that. Also, and things have changed regarding Canadians' awareness and concerns regarding military preparedness. It used to be way down the list of concerns that Canadians brought to bear when we went to the polls, but now it seems to have risen. Whether it be conversations about a commitment of 2% of GDP to military spending, of which we're nowhere close, and we've never been, and no political party is committed to achieving that number. But when you look at some of the preparedness numbers, if we had to do something today, we have active forces right now in Latvia, but we would only be, across the different branches of the armed forces, some 58% prepared. So we can talk about that if you're so inclined. And we're short some 16,000 troops inside the Canadian Armed Forces as well. Amazing stuff. Okay, news that was welcomed yesterday, and this is about the crushing debt load that Canadians have and the interest rates associated with, especially for folks holding variable rate mortgages. So the Bank of Canada, after 10 consecutive hikes, has, for the first time since March of 2022, lowered interest rates, albeit by 25 basis points, bringing the overnight interest rate from 5% to 4.75%. It's not huge, but I do think it's significant. Hopefully it's a beginning of a trend downwards versus the trend upwards, which has really pummeled Canadians, whether it be on the housing side, the energy side. So I guess it's encouraging, but here's the biggest problem, I think, when we talk monetary policy in the Bank of Canada and their credibility. It's taken a beating. You know, whether it be the missteps regarding messaging and or the, looks like, I'm not an expert in the field by any means, but the issues with how they approach and the timeliness with the quantitative easing and tightening, and here we are. Canadians are absolutely struggling under the crushing interest rates that we've been paying. And there's going to be, hopefully, some more of these moves downwards. It's probably going to be slower going back down than it was going up. That's probably the consensus across the board. But it's a minor break at least. And so for those of us out there who would soon have to renegotiate our mortgages, hopefully mine's not up until there's a little bit more of an ease on that front. But that credibility issue, that's going to be important. And we do need it to be operating at an arm's length from politics and politicians. But if you want to talk about that with any air of authority, please bring your thoughts to the show this morning. And on that note, so price of gas down. We've seen a bit of a downward trend here. So 3.6 cents of gas down, diesel around the same, price of furnace oil down, stove oil down. The only increase is in propane, which is always pretty stable. It's up less than a cent. So at this point, it's down 16 cents than it was in early May. So that's 4 drops in the last 5 weeks, which is good news. Every time we mention the price of gas, I will inevitably get an email that says, when are they going to do away with that infamous 5 cents? Just for the purpose of information. So the 5 cents people still think is associated with the warm idle that come by chance before it was bought by Brea. But that's not it at all. In the warm idle world, the province actually put $16.6 million on the table to keep that facility in warm idle to make it more attractive for a potential buyer. The 5 cents, of course, is for Silver Peak, who were the former owners at Come By Chance, and that's for their importation and distribution of fuels. I'm with you, though. I'd like to see that go by the wayside because every little bit counts when you go to fill up because it is quite dear, much akin to going to the grocery store. But yeah, the 5 cents is not a warm idle issue. That's already been dealt with and spoken for. All right, little interesting news coming from the Energy NL conference yesterday. While the keen focus has been on World Energy GH2 and their massive proposal on the Port-au-Port Peninsula, Pattern Energy, very quietly, has apparently leapfrogged the rest of them because they've got a letter of intent signed with a German entity. The issue regarding Pattern, which has made them much more of a quiet proposal, is because they're doing it on private land, right? They're going to develop some 4,000 acres of land owned by the Port of Argentia. So it's expected to be about a 300 megawatt project, about World Energy, about 13 times the size of Pattern Energy's play. But it looks like they're now out in front. They have submitted environmental assessment to the province. They struck this deal quietly back in March, apparently, and just announced it yesterday. So obviously they're quite chuffed with their opportunities moving forward. That means that we can take on those entire conversations. But there has been just an amazing focus on one proposal out of the 5. But here's Pattern Energy, sort of leapfrogging the rest of them with their play here. Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. So, and of course, it doesn't take reading between the lines. The province and the feds are absolutely all in on this play. And there will be obviously environmental related questions, but price point questions on the other side. Because while we look at these so-called transition fuels and transition opportunities, the cost of a variety of alternatives for sources of energy are coming down. green hydrogen remains pretty expensive. And don't take it from me, take it from the Germans. They think that they're going to have to subsidize the purchase and the use of green hydrogen on their end because they've set aside 1.2 billion euro to do exactly that. But Pattern, they're out in front, and good for them. Congratulations. But on private land makes it a different conversation. I get that. All right, apparently an update coming this morning from Marine Atlantic and the concerns regarding their new vessel, the Alasunu. No one's really sure. Well, I guess some people have floated some rumors and rumbles to me, but whatever problem is with the lubrication system. But it's scheduled to be on the run, the Argentia run, in about a week. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen, but we'll get an update there. And hopefully some of the reporters in attendance will be able to get some more information about the changes to the reservation system, which was one of the concerns brought forward by a caller on this program yesterday. And in the world of travel, looks like pretty good news and some forward momentum for the folks at the Deer Lake Airport Authority. Another Porter flight announced. They got WestJet and Flair in operations. It looks like they're going to be back to pre-pandemic levels this summer. Last year they were around 92%, but it looks like they're going to be right back to 2019-ish numbers. So congratulations to them. And of course, Air Access, as we talk about all the time, whether it be for business-related travel and or pleasure, but absolutely for tourism. And I heard Tammy Priddle, who's the CEO out at that airport authority, talk about that, not only the passenger volume, but, the destinations close by and the tourism product that is Western Newfoundland and, yes, in the Great Northern Peninsula. So they've obviously done yeoman service to bring these flights to Deer Lake. So congratulations to them. And let's hope that all airports here have a busy tourism season. And I continue to get questions about how much are we paying WestJet for the thrice weekly flight from St. John's International to Gatwick, London. We don't know. Apparently it's a moving target based on ticket sales, which makes sense. But the reality is the provincial government set aside $3.75 million for airport authorities, but that's all of them. So it can't be huge money going to WestJet, and hopefully that'll be a successful route as well. Okay, a couple of quick ones before we get to you. So, not surprisingly, I'm hearing from home care workers constantly about the confusion that reigns supreme inside these contract negotiations. So whether it be concerns about the rate of pay, and we've got to get it right. If we don't pay them properly and we have a shortage of home care workers, that's going to be an enormous problem. And then, of course, there's concerns and questions about medical benefits. But here's an additional problem. If you're a home care worker that's represented by the Group of 22, which is some 22 different agencies representing over 4,000 workers. Not all of them are registered with NAPE. And so consequently, that brings upon a problem for being able to attend the meetings and to vote, period. So if you're one of those workers and you're wondering whether or not you're actually registered and thinking maybe the agency you work for has registered you on your behalf, it's probably not the case. So make sure that you make that call to NAPE to ensure that you're registered so that you do have your voice heard with a vote in the upcoming, possibly ratification of that particular contract offer. All right. And the story regarding social workers. The period of time, I can't remember off the top of my head now exactly what the period of time was, but I think it was between 2014 and 2021. They're leaving the profession in droves. There was 202 resignations versus 19 retirements in that time frame. And then they talk about, and this has long been a concern, is the age at which social workers are brought into the most traumatic division, that'd be child protection. Because in the world of unionized employees, seniority brings along some benefits associated with being able to choose which division you'd like to work in. And of course, with the caseload and the paperwork and the trauma of being in child protection, we've seen a lot of young people in that portfolio. But apparently, they're also highly represented in the number of social workers that are leaving. And so consequently, the caseload problem that was already in place, of course, has been further exacerbated with fewer social workers. So we talk about some of the recruitment and retention for whatever the case may be inside the world of healthcare. And I would add social workers to the healthcare file, of course. You don't hear much about them. Nurses and doctors, sure. Nurse practitioners, pending legislation for psychiatric nurses up and down the line, right. Social workers, not so much. And of course, it's not as easy to just go to one department to talk about social work, because it's not just health and community services. It's justice. It's over in cancer care. It's in education. So there's a lot of different areas where social workers are present under different ministerial portfolios. But the problem is they're leaving. And most of it's because of burnout and trauma and caseload. And that can't be something that we don't try to buck that particular trend. Last couple of quickies before we get to you. All right. So, good morning and congratulations with the stick-to-itiveness shown by Georgina McGrath. And I guess the same could be said for Senator Fabian Manning. They first proposed Private Members Bill S-249 back in 2018, but with the pandemic and the federal election, it didn't get all the required debate in the Senate, and now it looks like it's going to make its way through. So this is about intimate partner violence. Ms. McGrath suffered mental, physical abuse, at least with a couple of her partners. And the stories are horrific. Senator Manning met with, I think he said somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 different women to talk about their experiences. And so now, it's one thing to have national strategies, but as Senator Manning points out, legislation is law. So, bravo to Ms. McGrath and to Senator Manning for championing this over the years. And of course, Ms. McGrath is a successful businesswoman operating a bunch of different companies in Labrador, and the derailment that comes with being the victim of this type of violence has been, I can't speak for Ms. McGrath, but if you are listening, please do indeed bring forward your thoughts about where this bill is, and even if you'd like to relay some of your story. You know, if you appear or present, at a hospital with a knife or a gunshot wound, their healthcare professionals on site are obliged by law to contact law enforcement. But if you present, say, for instance, with displays or signs of strangulation or anything that might be associated with domestic violence or intimate partner violence, not so much. And of course, yes, it's predominantly women who are victimized, but men can be on the receiving end of domestic violence as well. So it would be great to hear from either Senator Manning or Georgina McGrath or anyone else who'd like to bring this forward, because the changes seem to be important to me. In addition, the amendments made to the Limitations Act here in the province have also done, not only talking about people like Jack Whalen and doing away with some of the limitations that were not associated with things beyond sexual abuse, to include physical and mental abuse, but also the ability for victims of intimate partner violence to go to civil court about what had happened to them. So I know that's a big one to end the preamble on, but there you go. And of course, you know me, we can talk about whatever's on your mind. Yesterday there was a lot of stuff about road safety, school bus safety, speed cameras and the like. Also want to pass along this message that may have fallen by the wayside from some owners of these vehicles. Toyota and General Motors are telling owners about 8,300 vehicles in Canada, stop driving them because there's a problem with the airbags. They might explode. The notice covers vehicles between 2003 2004 models sold in Canada, including approximately 5,000 Toyota Corollas, 1,600 Toyota Corolla Matrixes, 700 Toyota RAV4s, and 1,000 Pontiac Vibes from General Motors. Bring them to the dealer to have the airbag issue dealt with. We're on Twitter, where VOCM Openline follows there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. That means you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin this morning on line number 4. Good morning, Christopher. You're on the air.
Hey, Patty. How are you today?
I'm doing okay, thank you. How about you?
Not too bad. I tried to call yesterday about the foreign interference, but it was a little bit late calling in.
Okay.
Things were brought up in Parliament with the World Economic Forum. Anthony Rotunda, he was Speaker of the House at the time. And somebody asked a question about the WEF in Canadian Parliament, and basically you could hear, you can see it yourself. It's out there. He shut down the question. You could hear it fine, and basically he kiboshed anything to do with the World Economic Forum. Christia Freeland, she's a board member on the World Economic Forum, so that in itself would be a conflict of interest, because you're dealing with a foreign agent outside of Canada, World Economic Forum.
But they're not a government.
They're not a government, no, but like I say, they're dealing with other governments. So the G8 countries are following the Agenda 2030 that the World Economic Forum has. So it's collusion with the G8 countries.
But they have no say over anything, though. I really do think that the WEF is a bit of a political boogeyman. I mean, in essence, they're just a bunch of self-important blowhards. I mean, no one has to accept anything they say. They have no authority over sovereign nations. They just, find themselves, as I said, self-righteous, self-important. And, for the fact that people... Say what?
They got the money. Where do you, like, in order for to get ahead? Yeah, I look at Canadian politics. I watch it on a daily. I look at Jagmeet Singh. I look at the Bloc. I look at the Liberals. I look at. They're not there to do anything for the people. They're there to do it for themselves or the people. Politics is just an illusion of choice.
You don't think the
choose
same? Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily unfair, but don't you think the same can be said for any party in power? I mean, self-importance, and their number one task is to get elected. Number two is get re-elected. So isn't that the same case for any party?
This is why I laugh, because they're all in cahoots together. Whereas, when anything comes up for the people, if the Bloc blocks it, the NDP will say yeah, or if the NDP says yeah, the Bloc will block it. There's nothing for the people, but when it comes to handing dollars to foreign countries and weapons and Israel and Ukraine, they'll hand over fist. But when it comes to the people, nothing.
I think when you look at Ukraine, I guess the measurement has to be based on what would be more costly, financially and otherwise, with one side or the other winning. And whatever winning looks like, I'm not even really sure. But a Putin or Russian victory is probably more dangerous than a Ukrainian holding firm, and that requires, of course, a lot of support. And remember, when they they did away with their nuclear arms, the rest of the world promised to be there for in their defense. So that's a commitment that was made well before the Trudeau Liberals were ever in power. And on top of it, I'm being led to believe that it's simply the West's fault, the Allies' fault, the members of NATO's fault that provoked this invasion, which kind of makes no sense to me at all. And then, it's a question of where does it stop? So everyone thought it was over in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. It didn't stop them. And so I think a victory is kind of important for NATO as a group of allies. I mean, if Article 5 is triggered, we go to war. We're obliged.
Well, what you got to look at, though, is there was a Minsk agreement signed saying that NATO wouldn't go any further west. And basically, they trampled all over that and went in and started doing what they did 3 times. And then Russia says, okay, well, I finally had enough. Put their foot down, and they said, okay, well, this is it with Ukraine. We're going in there, and we're going to take, because we don't want you here.
Is Russia not a problem, Christopher?
Pardon?
Is Russia not a problem?
Is Russia on our doorstep? Is Russia?
As a matter of fact, yes.
Hold on now. Do Russia have military bases in 186 countries? No, they don't. The United States do.
Yeah, I don't know what the Americans have to do with this. But, you asked, is Russia on our doorstep? The answer was yes.
But what you got to realize is the United States is with the United Nations. The United Nations is the WEF's, basically, their military.
The United Nations is as old as 1945.
I'm very well aware of how old the United Nations is, but it was mentioned in Davos that the United Nations and the WEF are linked. One of the elites said it to a rebel newscaster.
But why are we taking what they say seriously? That's where I kind of get lost in this World Economic Forum issue. Just because Klaus Schwab says something, who cares?
Well, hold on now. They got an Agenda 2030, which is
they got an agenda.
Well documented. It's well documented that Klaus Schwab has penetrated the cabinets of.
But that's because he says so. That's because he says so. Does that mean it's actually true?
It's on paper. It's on paper.
But it's on a piece of paper he wrote. We take.
It's on the World Economic Forum's website.
Yeah, but,
right. Why? I don't know why, but they are. Stephen Guilbeault, he was an activist. He was locked up. He was a eco-terrorist. He was an eco-terrorist. That's what you could call it. And he's over in China, working with China. But no, we don't know who's doing what. But you can point it out, and it's like, I don't believe that. You can have all the evidence in the world, but nobody's nobody that's in power is actually listening to it, right?
Well, I suppose some of them are. You know, Mr. Poilievre has said he will not allow anyone in his party to travel to Davos, even though he's been there. Stephen Harper has presented at the World Economic Forum several times. I mean, here's my summary point, then I'll give you the final word, Christopher. The World Economic Forum is as old as 1971.
Not disputing that. I'm not disputing that.
No, but if they are, what you say they are, hold on, let me finish. So, opened in 1971. If they have the influence and the agenda, as you suggest, it's the slowest moving coup in the history of man. Right? And I mean, it's not like the Conservatives have never been to the World Economic Forum. They have exactly zero authority over anything. So if things that they talk about there come to pass in some form or fashion in countries around the world, I don't think we need to draw a direct link. Well, Klaus Schwab has his finger on the governments of the day in modernized countries and members of the G7, because if you look around and compare G7 or G20 countries, they all have different strategies, they all have different paces of play, they all have different investment policies, they all have different investment dollars. So if he's running some sort of long game, what? Go ahead.
Following the same playbook. They're all following the same playbook. So, like, I mean, if that's not interference in itself, I say they're all following the same playbook. So if that's not interference in amongst itself, what is it? What would you call it?
But are they actually following the same playbook? I don't think you can draw a direct relationship between what the French and the Germans, the Americans and the Brits are all doing at the same time, because there's obviously not the case. All have different plays in place, period. I mean, one of the things the World Economic Forum has been preaching for a long time is so-called just transition and whatnot. But while that's going on in Davos, and yes, a bunch of hypocrites and a bunch of blowhards, and they're talking about my carbon emissions, well, they all fly their own private jets to Davos, that's all hypocritical problem. 100% acknowledge that. But while they were talking about there should be no more oil, the federal government here, including Stephen Guilbeault, approved Beta Nord. Right? We just bought a $30 billion pipeline. So it's not like we're all out. And just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, at the Energy NL conference, the Premier said we're all in on oil. So the playbook must be pretty tattered and loose, because if we're all following the same one, it must be written in different languages, because it doesn't seem to be the case.
Fair enough. Now, the question I got for you is, if all this is the way it was going, Canada had a turbine for the Nord Stream pipeline when sanctions were in place, and they went through Germany to get through to get it back to Russia. Like, I mean, isn't that collusion with foreign entities to do basically you're breaking a contract to get something that's banned, supposed to be banned, back to them?
What do you know what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline?
Yeah, the Americans blew it up.
The Americans blew it up.
That's right.
When I saw foreign interference on the subject line here, given some of the reports that are coming out in Canada about foreign interference and the meddling in our elections, and the NSICOP report that we have parliamentarians who remain unnamed that have been dealing with bad actors and sharing information to the detriment of the country, I thought that's what we're going to talk about, because that's things that we have some control over.
Well, it's all connected. Like, I mean, if you connect the dots, it all adds up, right?
Well, even in the initial report at the inquiry it wasn't just Liberals that were involved. There was also 4 Tories. So it's not quite as fundamental as the links that you draw, in my own personal opinion.
Again, Paddy, this is what I was getting at.
Okay, last word.
Again, what I was saying to you, politicians are only an illusion of choice, because they're not doing anything for the people. They're doing it for their friends. They're doing it for themselves. I say an audit needs to be done on every member in Parliament. Then you would know where the money is coming from. Then you would know. Well, none of that is going to come true, because everybody is trying to hide from everybody else, and they're lining their own pockets, and they're looking after themselves.
Well, just yesterday I talked about the preferential treatment of McKinsey and Company as consultants, and the non-competitive nature of many of the contracts that went out the door to McKinsey. So, but to your point, I'm not so sure we can trust parliamentarians to investigate themselves.
No,
I think that's a bit of a fool's errand.
That's the fox guarding the hen house. And then you got the RCMP, Brenda Lucki, who was married to a Liberal She married a high liberal ranking member's first cousin. It's all connected. You can see where the dots line up. There's no accountability for anybody in the government. The police aren't doing their job because you can see that there's something going on that's criminal. They're covering, they're redacting documents, and these people said, "Oh, we're going to be transparent." Transparent like what? Looking through a lead-lined safe?
Yeah, they'll be opaque at best. Christopher, I appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for the call.
Yeah. Have a good day, Paddy.
You too. All the best. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Snow Crab. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Placentia St. Mary's. That's Sherry Gambin-Walsh. Good morning, Sherry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. I was just listening to your last caller. I don't think I'm an illusion of choice, but anyway, we'll leave that alone. Before we move into the fishery, I just want to talk about a couple of things that are happening in the district of Placentia St. Mary's. And I am very in tune with employment opportunities in my district. The West White Rose project is moving right along, appears to be on schedule, with a tow out from dry dock and then tow off to the offshore around the spring of 2025. Pattern Energy, I heard you mention them earlier in the show. They had another public engagement session this past Monday in Placentia, and I believe that's their 4th session now, could be more. I've attended 3 of them, very available to the residents, lots of staff there to answer questions, and they are setting up their office again in the mall in Placentia. They'll be advertising for that position very soon, so then the general public, when you have any questions, you can dart into their office there and have a conversation with the employee and try to get your questions answered. One of my questions, because my constituents are asking me, probably the only question I'm getting right now, is actually the distance of the turbines from the residential property. So it appears that because of wetlands and what have you, that 650 to 700 meters may be the closest, but they can reduce the height of some of these turbines, so there's to decrease any potential impact. So, there was it's really, for me, wind turbines, it's been nonstop, as you mentioned earlier. It is on private property in Argentia, so it is moving right along. And there's a lot of excitement in the area. I grew up in Placentia when the base was there, and the benefits of it's a no-brainer, the benefits of employment in the area. We just had a brand new Canadian dollar store open up there, and things are starting to, come back in the Placentia area, which is so nice to see, because I've been there, I've lived there through the ups and the downs. And transportation infrastructure. There's some pavements going in the district of Placentia again this year. TI is focusing on main roads and continue to focus on main roads, which is understandable. The municipalities have stepped up to the plate. Some of them have been very innovative for side roads. I'm very proud of my municipalities, and especially Fox Harbour. I have to give credit to Fox Harbour. They stepped up last year, took over a road, and this year they're working with TI to help maintain another road. So some of the paving that's coming is up in Point Bird, out in Great Barrow-Swa, up in Southeast, or finishing up Southeast. That's kind of been going on now. I'm going into my 9th year now, so we've been doing pavement in Southeast on and off. Fresh water, finally. There's a culvert replacement now out on the Argentia access out by Fitzgerald's Pond. I think that's kind of an emergency thing. And Ship Harbour started last year, and they're going to finish it this year, which is really good. And again, I have a lot of bad side roads in my district, so we're trying to, do the maintenance on them and work with the municipalities. And where I don't have municipalities, I really advocate hard for the maintenance, because I understand my local service districts don't have the same resources available to them through the Community Building Fund or through the taxpayer base to step up to the plate, like the community of Fox Harbour has. Got to give credit to them. Now, the crab fishery. So, Patty, can't ignore what happened. I'm married to a skipper, a harvester, have been around this industry for over 35 years. So I'll just paint the picture for you. I got up 3:30 in the morning. I went into Confederation Building as a politician because we had to bring in a provincial budget. And my office is situated so that I'm right over the protest. I'm looking out, and there's my husband and his crew, and a lot of my constituents. So it was a really, really difficult and hard time. But I understand why they did it, because, I mean, I've been around it for so many years. And I'm also have been advocating for an increasing in processing down in St. Mary's Inc. And as you know, that's a new plant. We're into our second year now, and we started off this year down there with 5.5 million pounds to process. They could do more. They showed that last year through the situation we had last year.
The total last year ended up around 6 million, did it? Because they started with 2, and then there was overcapacity at other plants that got trucked in. The whole issue there was whether or not it's fair to have a cap for some of these so-called smaller plants versus the big players in the industry where there are no caps.
I totally agree. That is one of the issues. They have been moved up to 7 million now as of last month. And we do have a monitoring committee in place, and I like that concept myself and that idea. So the monitoring committee is on the ground. They're the processors and the harvesters and the union, and they're able to see what's happening as it's unfolding. This is a complex industry. And while some people say, oh, my God, every year there's an issue, well, every year there's a total allowable catch. Every year there's a change. I mean, this is a living, live species. It's a species that's moving. It's the whole thing. The fishery is live, so it's going to be somewhat, a little bit complex. But I am very supportive of the competition process. I remember back in the 90s when my children were small and I was home with them, our phone would start ringing in the house just after Christmas in January. And it would just ring, ring, ring with buyers and the competition and trying to get my husband's crab. The phones went dead. They went dead. And it was only when his process started, last year, there was some angst amongst the harvesters, that I realized that the phones were not ringing and hadn't been ringing for years. And it really hit home to me, because that meant that the formal competition that should be there was gone. It was absolutely gone. So
what time frame are we talking about here now when the phones went quiet?
I'm going to say, well, in the late 90s and into 2000, they were ringing. And I'm going to say that they probably went dead quiet about 10, 12 years ago.
Okay, but now that...
For the last 12 years, I don't think we've had real competition.
How about this year?
Oh, this year, my husband continues to sell to the company that he's sold to for the last few years. He hasn't had any issues or concerns. Actually, they're quite good. They're a good company. And, he didn't know. They're not overly loud, but I am talking to other harvesters, and other harvesters say there is some competition there now with the outside buyer concept. And with the increase in the processing to the 7 million for St. Mary's Inc., that definitely did help. The thing with the crab is that it's up and down, right? There's years are going to have really good years, and there's going to be, a large quantity of crab to process. But there's years there's not going to be a large quantity of crab to process. And the way to look to the future is to look to the past. So just look to the past for the last 20 years, and you'll see the ebb and flow, the up and down. That's the reality of it.
The only moving part here is the price. And I don't know how it becomes so complicated, and I'm not involved anymore in the fishery period. But if we're talking about total allowable catch, and that'll fluctuate, this year it's almost 114 million pounds of crab. It's the percentage of the market price afforded to the harvester, the percentage of the market price afforded to the processor. If we lock that in, like they've done in Alaska, then we could probably do away with some of the standoffs and headbutting that happens pretty much every single year. The ASAP and the FFAW say that the new market formula that they've struck for crab, lobster and halibut has brought an end to that, but it doesn't sound like it when I talk to harvesters. It doesn't sound like it when I read the harvesters forum on Facebook. There's still plenty of worries out there. What kind of price is your husband getting for his crab?
He's getting a set price.
So the floor of $3.25.
Yeah, and he has a good relationship with the processor and has had one. He's got 3 crab licenses, so he's got a fair bit of crab to bring in, and he's halfway through now his quota. But there's collective bargaining matters here too, right? That as we all know and as you know, so they have to unfold between the FFAW and us. And there's no spot for government in a collective bargaining matter. And I mean, that is a reality. So that is sometimes what makes things a little bit more heated and a little bit more complicated. And with the harvesters, while all this was going on and people were saying, like, what's wrong with them? Well, I'll tell you what was wrong with them. Some of the things that it's hard to really understand. It's through all this, where they were negotiating, there were things like deductions. Like, the price is not the price. That's what I kept saying to people. There are things like temperature deductions and overfill pan deductions and 80-20 tolerance deductions and all those different things. And yes, the harvesters can control some of this stuff. But I'll just give you one example that I try to, talk when I'm talking to some of my constituents that really don't understand it. If you come in with 30,000 pounds of crab and you had 667 pans, for example, and 33 pans were sampled, just based on this volume, if 2 of those pans were above 4 degrees Celsius, that ends up being a 25% deduction of the total weight. So, I mean, that's a fair dollar amount. So this is the kind of stuff that they were back and forth about. It was temperature deductions and the sampling and the overfill pans and the tolerance. Now, I don't know what happened with the union there last year or something where the tolerance was no longer there, because they always had a 20% tolerance. But that's resolved now. Thank God that was resolved. But, I mean, the other thing is, too, like, I tell you what has, and it has happened this year. Not only, like, I know it has, because I'm on the wharf talking to my harvesters. I could talk this language, so I'm on the wharf. But what has happened this year also, and they've been on trip limits now. I think they're increasing their a number of times now they can go out, so things are starting to flow a little bit better now. But at times, harvesters would arrive to the wharf this year with their crab to unload it, and not be able to unload it right away until the next morning because there was no human bodies, no human resources there to do it. So, that's out of their hands. That's the processor's issue. I mean, he's the one, it's his crab once it arrives at the wharf, and he's got to get it unloaded. So there's those kind of issues and concerns, too. And that is why they're so frustrated. And they're working now, too. So it's hard to, you're working against the weather. You got to go with the weather. You can't sit and wait. And when you've been told you can't go and the weather is good, it's extremely frustrating. So, all the anxiety and all the frustration that happens during the season built up, and it resulted into what we saw, the protest.
And I mean, the temperature issue in the overfilled pans, that's the problem with the time versus offloading versus inspection. So that's a problem that really can indeed be settled and solved. I don't know why it seems to be so difficult. I've got to leave it at that, Sherry, but anything else very quickly?
No, I'm just going to say, hats off to the harvesters. Seems like they're having a good season, and I'm really happy that we're up to £7 million for processing of snow crab in St. Mary's. It's absolutely booming down there, Patty. And Riverhead Road is going to be paved, so you can take a trip down. It'll be a good trip for you from St. John's right on down to Riverhead.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
You take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So the issues regarding tolerance and overfilled pans and temperature, so they're absolutely really legitimate concerns that have been talked about on either side. But, part of the problem, I assume, is that some people thought that maybe that boom year, getting $7.60 a pound, that's going to be the rule as opposed to the exception. And then consequently, when you're talking about $2.20 and $2.75 and even $3 and even $5, which was rolling around there for a little while, not quite the same. Let's get a quick one before the break. Line 3, Bruce, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Bruce. Yep. I'm calling about 2 weeks ago. I was up on Blackmare Road, just right on back of McLaughlin Supplies, and there was a kid's bicycle. It's brand spanking new. It has a basket on the front, and there was the little girl who was. There's flowers in the basket, like they're teen beds, we used to call them years ago, little yellow ones, and there's a bell on it, and the bike is brand new, and it was on the back of McLaughlin Supplies on Blackmarsh Road, and I'm just calling to find out if there's anybody, I'm sure there's somebody lost, I'm sure there's somebody looking for it, and I would really appreciate it to give it back to the kid who owned it, because it's something that's like, if I find it hard to sleep knowing that I got it there, I imagine how hard she finds to sleep knowing that she owns it.
Yeah, and someone stole it, took it for a little joyride, just
Yeah,
ditch it.
and it's a little kid's bike, and it's the seat on it, the seat on the girl's bike. It's white. Hang on, I just got to make sure I got all the colours, but it was up on back of there, and the same time it was up on back of there was a gentleman up there, and he was cutting the grass. Now that could have been his daughter, right? There with him when on the job that day, and I'm just thinking, but the way it is with me, I'm here, and I just go down the base and make sure now, because I think
that's a good enough description.
Okay.
They'll know.
Yeah, anyway, it's here, and it has an orange seat on it. Not an orange, a pink seat and pink handlebars.
Very good. So we have your number. If someone calls asking about the bike, we'll get them to call you. How's that?
Yes, my buddy, just because I want to get this, I'd love to be able to get it back to the kid, because then that way I can rest.
Sounds good. Hopefully that happens today. Thanks for the call, Bruce.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. A quick one before we get to Peter on line number 6. Bill, you're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Daly. I just called in to let your listeners know. I was just talking to your producer. He asked me to go on the air for a moment. There looks like a serious accident on the Manuel's Access Road coming towards Conception Bay South just before the Fowler's Road overpass. Emergency crews are on the scene and other emergency vehicles headed that way. I seen them coming as I was leaving. So just a reminder to your listeners to slow down in that general area, let the crews do their job.
Absolutely, and it's probably going to be a traffic snarl, so avoid it at all costs, and fingers crossed that there's no one seriously injured.
Yes, yeah. The traffic wasn't too bad there about 10-15 minutes ago, but like I said, there was more personnel going to the scene. There was a vehicle in the ditch upside down. So possibly a serious incident there. Yeah,
possibly. I appreciate the heads up for the motoring public to avoid that area. Thanks for this, Bill.
You're welcome, Mr. Daly. Have a good day, sir.
Very same to you. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep rolling. So stay away from that area. Folks, if possible, line number 1, Peter, you're on the air.
Morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
Paddy, before I move on to my topic, I'd just like to say I listened to Sherry Gamble Walster, and it's nice to know that she's listened to her constituents. We hope that the rest of the MHAs fall in line with that and put their views forward, and I hope that the Minister of Fisheries, Mr. Lovelace, and Mr. Fury will listen also. But anyway, nice to hear her on there. I'd just like to say to Paddy that I speak about the upcoming election, the union election, the executive for the FFAW. And I didn't put my name forward. I was talking to you briefly before that. I was still debating it, but one reason was my age, and the other reason, I guess, my family was totally opposed to me running. And so anyway, we decided not against it. And so anyway, I said I'd keep you in the loop there. But Paddy, there are 3 candidates for the present position. One fellow, Dave Callahan, I've talked to him before, and there's another fellow, Abe Solberg. I believe he's a scientist, a younger man in the office there at the FFAW. And then there's Dawn Street. Well, she's been a business agent for a while now, and she's been around the fishermen and various areas and other portfolios in there, I guess. And after the union, like the past executive and the executive now, like they endorsed Abe Solberg, right? That tells me, Paddy, that there won't be any change, because to be like sliding in Keith Sullivan in the past and Greg Prizzy and all the rest that they slide in, whether it's a president or a secretary, treasurer, you do what they say, and the only thing you'll have will be the title, and the past executive like Bill Radrick, Dave Decker, and all those fellows, like the heavyweights, still be run it the same as they always done, But I don't know. I guess you'll be just dragging them around by the nose and telling them what to do. And 90% of the members now, Paddy, I would say, know what I'm saying is fact. And my belief, like this morning, the best candidate there is Dawn Street. That's the candidate capable of being the next president of the FFAW for fish harvesters. and for all union members, But she's running on experience, and I know that she got that, and she got knowledge, she got education, and she's open to change inside the FFAW. That's open to change the way the FFAW is being ran inside them four walls now. And she's open to learn and listen, and she's not too young and she's not too old to learn, Fatty. So I think I know out of those three candidates, she is the best person to be president. And I've talked to her several times, and she's throwing stuff out there that'd be hard not to like. And there's a lot of people who are supporting her. And I just think, Paddy, that it's time for someone who wants change, because when you get $2.60 a pound for crab and he starts off paying $3, $3.75, $4.50, you need someone there with a different attitude towards negotiations. That's one thing, but that's just one of the things. There's a lot of things, as Sherry Gammon-Walsh was talking about there, that needs to be in. And then you got your lobsters, and then you got your cod, capelin, all those other species. And then you get the plant workers. Some companies are paying $24 an hour non-unionized, and other people are paying the minimum wage, $17, $18 like that, So I don't know, it's a crowd that's been there for the last number of decades. Are they getting the best for their members? That's what I'm saying. And then you're looking at insurances and dental and all that kind of other stuff. There must be a way that we could be entitled to that, if other people on ships and all the retail sector are entitled to it.
I don't know why it's such a mess. I know it's a bit more complex than maybe people give it credit for. But, Peter, appreciate the time. We've had all three on this program. Dave Callahan on a variety of different issues over the years, but both Dwan Street and Abe Solberg have been on this program talking about their want to be the president and talk about different issues and some of their vision for the union. Anything else, Peter, before I have to get to the news?
No, just as well, fellow fish officers out there and stuff like that, that's not the way I would like it. I would like a union for offshore trawlers, inshore fishermen, and plant workers alone, the same we started off. But we're not going to get that right away, at least. So we'll go with the best we got. And the best we got right now, in my opinion, Paddy, is Don Street is the best for president. And that's my belief, Paddy, not my opinion.
Fair enough.
Good day, and thanks for taking me call.
Anytime, Peter. Stay in touch. All right, let's,
bye.
Bye-bye, Peter. Very quickly before we get to the news, I want to say the happiest of birthdays to Edna Upshaw. She's celebrating her birthday today. She's out in Chanscove, so happy birthday to you, Edna. When we come back, we're going to talk about the fact there was a conditional, pardon me, I shouldn't probably use I can't remember what the right word was, a conditional discharge for an RCMP officer recently here in this province. We'll get the accusations that were faced by Officer Wheeler in the courts from Colin. And Dave wants to talk about some history out in Port of Schwa. Okay, don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Colin, you're on the air.
Morning, Mr. Daly. How are you this morning?
Okay, thanks. How about you?
Doing well, thanks.
Although I'll throw this out there just for the laughs that it is. So we had a caller talk about the World Economic Forum. A fair ball if people want to talk about it. But I've been accused by a couple of emailers that because I was in Montreal watching a couple of hockey games with my wife while they were congregating in Davos, Switzerland, that the assertion is that I was attending the event because yes, middle class townies hosting local radio shows are invited to Davos. Oh my! Anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. So go ahead with your topic, sir.
Yeah, I haven't been on in a couple of weeks because I was at the White House giving some advice to Joe Biden on how to handle Ukraine and Putin.
Anyway, Keep going. Let's keep going.
Anyway, I want to talk about a sentencing hearing in Supreme Court this week in St. John's regarding a police officer who was found guilty after a trial of pointing a firearm at a woman during a social event. I think it was on Bell Island back in around 2018.
It was.
And the circumstances of this Case was quite serious. He was off duty in uniform and had his firearm with him, and he attended a woman's house, and there was a consumption of alcohol at the house. And during an encounter with this woman, he unholstered his firearm and put the firearm to the woman's head.
Yep.
In a joking manner, according to him. And anyway, there was a trial. He was found guilty, and he was given a conditional discharge with a 1-year probationary period this week in Supreme Court by the Justice.
And even after Justice Chater, who I believe presided over that case, said, quote, well, I shouldn't say quote, substantial risk of serious injury, because of course there was. He was pointing a gun at someone's head.
Yeah, substantial risk of killing the woman. You know, that falls under serious injury, I guess.
Did they also make reference to a diagnosis of PTSD? Do I recall that correctly?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. And, you know, I don't take fault with the defense lawyer bringing that out, and the fact that he had no prior criminal record and other mitigating factors for the judge to consider. I understand that the defense lawyer has to act in the best interest of his client and advocate for his client and bring out circumstances that he believes will be favorable to his client on sentencing. So I don't take issue with that. What I take issue with is the granting of the discharge by the judge. That is an exceptionally serious offense. That man put a loaded firearm to a woman's head. That woman must have thought she was going to die.
You would think so. It's got to be fairly unsettling to have a gun pointed at your head, regardless of the circumstances or who's pointing it.
You know, yeah, it's and a police officer off duty in uniform doing that, and I just, you know, a discharge, a conditional discharge. He's going to be put on probation for 1 year now, and if he satisfies all the conditions of the probationary period, his conditional discharge will then become an absolute discharge, which means he doesn't get a criminal conviction on his record, so he can lawfully say that he has never been convicted of a criminal offence and that he doesn't have a criminal record, notwithstanding the fact that he has a finding of guilt registered against him. But I think it should be mandatory for offences like that. Any kind of firearm offence like that, pointing a firearm, a discharge should not be available for a finding of guilt. Section 730 of the Criminal Code, which is the statutory provisions in the code that sets out the criteria for granting absolute and conditional discharges, says that, among other things, that in order to be granted a discharge upon a finding of guilt or a plea of guilty, that you can't have a minimum sentence, and the maximum sentence can't be 14 years or more. So that this offence falls within that criteria. But I think there should be a look by Parliament, a reassessment by Parliament of that section of the Criminal Code, looking at exactly who can be granted a discharge and for what offences. Because I think right now Section 730 is too broad, and it gives a lot more discretion to judges. I think it should be specifically stated what sections of the Criminal Code, what criminal offences that you're eligible for, rather than the way it is now, that it's just more generalized, that it can't be a minimum sentence and the maximum sentence can't be more than 14 years. It has to be in the best interest of the accused, obviously, and not contrary to the public interest. The Crown in this case was looking for a jail sentence, which means that obviously they were looking for a conviction on this matter. But and the other thing is that Justice Chater noted that the accused in this case didn't display any remorse for his actions. I think it's definitely contrary to the public interest that there was a discharge given in this case. I think there should have been a conviction entered on that charge, and I think he should have gone to jail.
Yeah, and I don't know what weight the fact that he was an RCMP officer plays, but that could have been more detrimental than beneficial if you're an off-duty, in-uniform RCMP officer drinking and pulling out your gun. The fact that he's in a position of authority would think makes it worse, but it seems to me that plays a role in his favour in this particular decision by the justice responsible. Strange story all the way through.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, just let me shake in my head, really, that you put a gun to a woman's head. and a loaded firearm at that. And it's irrelevant whether it was loaded or not, but we do know that it was loaded because he was just off duty, so it had live rounds in the gun, right? Anything could have happened. That's a machine that that it could have discharged accidentally and could have struck the woman in the head and killed her. I mean, that's just. I don't. Words just can't even describe the feeling that I had for this woman and what she must have gone through at the hands of this police officer. And yeah, it's he has no prior record. He has PTSD. I understand that, and like I said, the defense lawyer brought all that out as mitigating factors. But I think there's overwhelming aggravating factors here, which you touched on, that he's a police officer, he's in a position of trust and authority, and I think it's overarching public interest that he had been convicted of that offence and gone to jail, whether it's for a year, 18 months, 2 years, that would be up to the judge. But I think a period of incarceration would have been warranted in that. And I don't know if the Crown's going to be looking at appealing that decision, but I would hope that they would.
I appreciate the time, Colin. Thanks for the call this morning.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Yeah, it is a very lenient outcome for a finding of guilt. Let's take a break. Dave, you stay right there and talk about history of the French in Port-au-Choix. Of course, the Basque were in Port-au-Choix for quite a long time. And as a matter of fact, the Basque word Port-au-Choix means little port, if I remember correctly. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Senator Fabian Manning. Of course, we talked about that off the top of the show this morning, the fact that Georgina McGraw has been championing this private member's bill called Bill S249. And, of course, Senator Manning has been her political ally on this front. Senator Manning, right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Well, Senator Fabian Manning brought forward Private Member's Bill S249. And when that bill was being developed, of course, he spoke to over 120 women here in this province, different organizations across the country regarding intimate partner violence. Here's one of the quotes from the champion of this bill, that's Georgina McGraw. This was she was presenting in front of the Senate's Committee on Social Affairs, Science and Technology on the 11th of April. It became constant emotional, mental and physical abuse. This nightmare ended with a rifle. He looked at me and said, "This bullet is for you and this one is for me." Join us on line number 1 is Senator Fabian Manning. Good morning, Senator. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How you doing?
Doing okay this morning, thank you. How about you?
Best kind here in Ottawa. Hopefully get home tonight, so all good.
Hopefully the fog lifts. Well, before we get into the particulars of the bill, what can you tell us about Georgina McGraw?
Well, I've known Georgina for a number of years, but in the winter of 2017, I had a call from Georgina and wanted to discuss with me the issue of what was at that time was domestic violence. The title was on it. And I met with Georgina on a couple of occasions, and matter of fact, the first meeting she told me her story, and to this day, that story resonates with me, and the many, many stories I've heard since then. But Georgina has been very, very strong and persistent on seeing this through. I'm delighted to be part of that and play my small part in doing that. But it's people such as Georgina and the many others that are out there that have been victims of intimate partner violence in so many different ways, Paddy, over their lifetime. And having a national, there's a national strategy. There's no national strategy in place to deal with intimate partner violence. We do have a national action plan on gender-based violence. As a matter of fact, just this week on Tuesday, I met for over 2 hours with the Deputy Minister and several people in the Department of Women and Gender Equality here in Ottawa. They have 4 years of funding, but they have a 10-year plan. My concern with that is that governments change, initiatives change. It's not the law of the land. So now there's been great work done in many sectors in relation to that, but it's not the law of the land. My bill that I put forward first in 2018, and we can talk about that later, is an act to develop a national strategy for the prevention of intimate partner violence. And the government would have 2 years to develop that strategy. Talk to people across the country, individuals, organisations, provincial governments, territorial governments, and come up with a strategy that we would have a national plan in place then that would be law of the land.
Yeah, because there's one thing to have an action plan, another to have a strategy, but as you rightfully point out, legislation is law. Can you share any particulars? Because one of the quotes is about, if I present out in the emergency room with a knife wound or a bullet wound, the healthcare professionals are obliged by law to report that to law enforcement, versus things like strangulation, which people refer to as one of the key signs of femicide. So can you share some particulars of what the bill includes and or any recommendations for what the legislation would look like?
Yeah, well, we'll go back to the beginning, because when I sat with Georgina in the beginning, and Georgina was telling me the stories of her own story, plus other stories of other people she had dealt with and talked to. I mean, I couldn't understand how you could arrive at the health science tonight with a gunshot wound or a knife wound, and the RNC or the RCMP are automatically called. But if you arrive there tonight, if a woman arrives at the health science tonight with her face beat in and physical violence, the police are not automatically called. I had a big problem with that, to be honest with you, in the beginning. I couldn't understand it. But as I met with these women over the period of the past number of years, and certainly in consultations with Georgina on a continuous basis, is that I learned that it's not that simple. That particular woman in health science tonight may not have the financial support to be able to do anything on her own, go out on her own. There may be children involved. She may be, in a lot of cases, sent back to the same environment that she came out of. The support systems are not there. There's a whole gamut of things. Now I understand that. So therefore, instead of asking for particular, because when we started, it was kind of, we were looking for a particular law to deal with that. But in the consultations that I have with the people here in the legislative library that guide us in legislation, they advised me that the best route was to go look for a national strategy, which then the government would be compelled to travel around the country, talk to everybody out there, and develop a law that coincides with everybody else there, and not to and at all times that the priority would be the victim. And that's okay. Sorry.
I was just going to say, in addition to maybe obligatory reporting, then I also think, and I don't know if this is part of this conversation, but discussions around bail for those accused of intimate partner violence. Because if someone's willing and wanting to hurt or kill their partner, then you can put all the orders of protection in place as much as you like, but it doesn't really curb it. And I think when we talk to women and organizations involved in this issue, they really have a distinct worry about how bail is assigned.
Oh, 100%. And there's so many different aspects of it, Paddy, and time doesn't allow us to do that here today. I met with an RCMP officer here in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago who has spent 30 years dealing with strangulation, and where that's to now in relation to intimate partner violence and all these different aspects. And that's why I was advised to ask for development of a national strategy, because if we take these things in silos, we're not going to be able to deal with the overall picture of intimate partner violence. We'll deal with certain aspects of it. So with a national strategy, we're hoping that we encompass all these issues, whether it's bail, whether it's the training for judges, whether it's my children that were involved in the DARE program back in grade 2 or 3 in school about drugs. Why don't we have a program in school talking about respect for the girls and women and all the different aspects of that. So it's an epidemic in our country, Paddy. I mean, since we started this process, now one thing we have to remember that only about 10% of these intimate partner violence incidents are reported to the police. Even with that, we have, since we started, myself and Regina started this process, over 1,000 women have been killed in this country by their intimate partners in the last 7 or 8 years. One every 6 days. I mean, that's just that statistic alone, is mind-boggling. And I mean, it's a very slow process to develop legislation. We first introduced the bill in 2018 because of the elections, because of the pandemic. Everything gets put on the back burner, so we reintroduced again last year. Georgina had her day here on April the 11th. She did an excellent job in presenting her story. The support we have received since then is overwhelming. I'm looking forward to getting the bill through, but again, it's a slow process.
Is there going to be some sort of inclusion for men as potential victims? Because we know overwhelmingly it is women that are victimized here, but there are some men who are also in a similar position. And then, the broader strokes when we talk about who are the perpetrators of domestic violence here. In large part, we've drawn direct relationships with their mental health or their mental well-being and their willingness to lash out. So if they don't have a purpose in life and the serious addictions that come with it. Because I think when we investigate case by case, there's a lot of distinct overlaps. So I guess the summary question is there a way for this bill to also represent whatever percentage of men who are also victimized by their intimate partner?
Yes, well, I've met with I met with over 120 women. That's between individual meetings and round tables. I've had 4 round tables in Newfoundland, in Newfoundland, Labrador, and I've met with 2 men. So the numbers are far outweighed by women, but the fact is that there is situations there with men also. And we're hoping to incorporate that as part of the bill, part of the strategy also. And there's a whole gamut of things in dealing with that too, Paddy, as you touched on. Mental health, housing is a big issue, support. The lack of support for victims is a big issue in relation to dealing with how we proceed with this. So that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do. There's a whole lot of things here, and I'm trying not to create silos. Because we need to look at the overall strategy across the country and the different laws that are in different provincial laws and territorial laws that play a part in this too. So it's a whole mix of things, and we're hoping to bring it all in under one umbrella. That's the game. That's the plan anyway, Paddy.
So what's next steps and timelines?
Well, it's before committee now. We had our first meeting, as I said, on April 11th when myself and Georgina appeared. The committee has heard from several organisations and witnesses since. The problem here in Ottawa now is we're in what we call the crazy season in June, that government legislation takes priority over private members' bills. My bill is a private members' bill. Mm-hmm. So government legislation overtakes all that. The committee now is dealing with 3 pieces of government legislation that pretty well have to be finalised by the end of June, and we only have 2 or 3 weeks here. So I was hoping to get the bill out of the Senate over to the House of Commons by the end of June, but I don't think that's going to happen. I spoke to Georgina yesterday on that, and she fully understands the process. And but I have great support among the senators. I have great support in the House of Commons. It's just a process of getting it through. So we can get it over to the House in the fall and get it passed through. My biggest concern is we're staring an election somewhere in the next year or so. If we don't get it through this Parliament, it goes on the back burner and you kind of have to start the process all over again, which is frustrating, and certainly frustrating for people out there that want this piece of legislation through, including myself. But I guess the privilege of the Senate, Paddy, is that we have time. In the House of Commons, I was there. You're always in election mode. I have another 15 years, God willing, in the Senate. I made a promise to Georgina and many other people that I will see this across the finish line with them, and I intend to do that, however long it takes.
And when it comes to issues like this, you can only hope that the 338 members of Parliament that will see this bill can drop their political leanings, because this is not a political issue. This is public safety. This is about the reality of life for far too many Canadians. Last one before I let you go. So nice work on this file. Getting any traction on the committee report about seals? And the most interesting facet of that for me was finally someone had this idea. If you continue to spread the lies and propaganda perpetuated by these various organizations, you're going to lose your tax exempt status. And we're talking about, the pictures of the baby seals that haven't been taken since the 80s, and the red blood on the white ice, and the fact that it's been a highly regulated and humane harvest. Getting any traction?
Yeah, we've had great response to our report. It's certainly a topic that we could touch base on another day,
okay.
Patty. The report was out on the 23rd of May. Spoke to the minister, was in the Senate the other day for question period. We're going to give her some time, but the response has been excellent right across the country from people in the industry, and I mean, there's it's baby steps, as you know, but the fact is that there is things that we can do. So let's try to concentrate on the things that we can do, such as dealing with the tax incentives with CRA, dealing with developing our domestic market, as much as we can. I mean, we talk to people in the industry and they say, look, if we had a good campaign here in Canada and develop our domestic market, we could make great strides in increasing the productivity in the seal industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. But it's right across, we've had excellent response, and certainly that we can certainly follow up on that for another day. That'd be a great discussion.
I look forward to it. Thanks for your time this morning, Senator.
Paddy, I'll take care. All the best. And I just wanted to finish up, if I could, in thanking Georgina McGrath and the many other women that I've dealt with, in those cases women and a couple of the men, for their patience. Because, explaining the process of legislative work is not easy sometimes, and understanding that. And, I'm at it every day. But Georgina certainly understands now. But the fact is that I want to thank them for their patience. But we will cross the finish line.
Appreciate this. Thanks, Senator.
Okay, take care, mate.
You too. Bye-bye. Senator Fabian Manning. That's important conversation about, action plans, national strategies versus legislation, law of the land. Let's take a break. When we come back, Karina's there to talk about the home care contract negotiations and meetings that are pending. And, I reminded folks via some information provided to me that not everyone that's represented by the Group of 22 and the 4,000 plus home care workers are registered with NAPE, consequently don't have an opportunity to vote. We'll see what Karina has to say about that. Margot wants to talk about school bus safety. There's a caller there to talk about drug use and people loitering around a particular area here in the city of St. John's. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go. Line number 1. Good morning, Davey. You're on the air.
Good morning. How you doing this morning?
Doing okay. Thanks. How about you?
Thank you for taking my call. I'm doing good. I'm talking to you from the French Room Culture Center and Bread Oven in Port au Choix. It's a beautiful day, and I thank you for taking my call because right here at the Bread Oven, there's a history in each and every loaf. It's a beautiful day here in Port au Choix. It's an awesome day here in Port au Choix.
Okay.
And we tries our best to explain from our history of salt fish. The French used to come here and fished for the dry their own cod here. And this dates back a long, long time ago.
Well, the first major basket fishing station in Port au Choix was back in the 1500s sometime.
That's right. Oh yeah, but what happened here is that we do have a French bread oven that was put in there in 2004. I hope I'm correct by saying 2004, and our oven is lit every day from June the 1st and all the way to the season ending, which will be somewhere in October. And we want to invite anyone that's on the Great Northern Peninsula, where there's so many nice things to see, is that there's a history in Port au Choix here at the bread oven, and there's a story beyond every loaf.
Give us a story.
Well, it dates back to a long, long time, sir. It was told to me just about 6,000 years almost. I mean, the Paola people came here and fetched their harp seal, and then so on and so on and so on. So it didn't start. I know this here was said to me when I was a child. I wasn't very old as a fisherman. Dad used to tell me that if there's no fish in Port au Choix, there's no fish nowhere else.
Does that mean that there was always a strong cod stock in and around Port au Choix? Is that what that means?
Exactly, because first when I was introduced to Port au Choix back in, I don't know if it was 83, 84, the season of 84, there was well over 200 longliners tied up to the Arctic warfare, and where there's a couple of 140-footers or bigger or smaller, there had to be a reason, you know what I mean?
Yep, of course. Well, that's the reason why most people are here. There's also fascinating stuff regarding Port au Choix and some of the archaeological sites that have been identified. I mean, I think they call it Dorset culture. Some of the tools and weapons that they found that date back almost to 200 A.D.
Right on. That's it. This is where it is. We have our limestone garden. So many cultures passed there, and we tell the story right here at the bread oven from the French culture, and we try our best to tell our visitors that how they used to salt the fish and dry it and put it back aboard the vessel again and bring it back to France. This is our object, and we get to meet all kinds of people from all walks of life, from all over the world, really. And if you ever get a chance this summer, sir, that you want to come up to the Great Northern Peninsula, we'll greet you, that's for sure.
I'd love to spend some time traipsing around the province this summer, to be honest with you. Davey, I appreciate your time this morning. Good luck with the bread oven, the French bread oven, pardon me.
That's right, the French bread oven. Yes, and for anyone that's come along that can that don't understand any English at all, il y aura pas de problème. Je suis capable de leur répondre. I can answer them.
Good man. Thank you, Davey.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. There you go. I mean, the Basque history in Portishead is very richly layered. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 2. Corina, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to talk once again about the situation with the home care workers. Last night was the Clarenville meeting on the agreement. So this morning I went on our Facebook page, which is called Home Care Providers of Newfoundland with NAPE. So I went on there to get a general oversight on how the meeting was and how productive it may or may not have been. Once again, I was mortified to find out how the NAPE speakers are being aggressive, how they're being verbally abusive and threatening towards the home care workers, which I should add, every one of these comments are all female workers, home care workers. I have a major problem with that. The speaker last night was Dave Healy. And as adults, you had Jerry Earl on, and he said it was very important for us to all be in attendance to our meetings, and that there will be, time for questions, and they'll answer all of our questions. And that seemed okay, but that's not actually what's taking place in these meetings. I find it very sad because I myself am at the point now that if this agreement goes ahead, that myself as well as hundreds of other workers have voiced they're prepared to walk away. Now, currently in this province, and I got a great rapport with quite a number of social workers. So at any given time, we have anywhere from 80, could be upwards of 160 individuals in the hospital that are released that cannot come out unless there's a home care worker put in place. And we have a major shortage. So my question would be more so to the Premier, Andrew Fury, and to Tom Osborne, can you afford right now to lose hundreds of home care workers when we're currently in a major shortage? Now, to move on with last night, talking to, many people, here's what they're saying. Do not let NAPE scare us into voting the way that they want us to. NAPE is working for NAPE. Tonight they've proven they don't give a shit about us home care workers. I have to ask why the agencies have not made an effort to ensure that everyone is registered and able to cast their vote. They had no comment. Dave Healy admitted that the last contract, the union did not have all the names of employees, and that took away their right to vote. An investigation needs to be done immediately. The more I learn about this situation, the angrier I feel. I voiced my concerns to the speaker, Dave Healy, about the wages. He said, "Where'd you get your information from, the home care group?" and brushed me off. He was very rude to all of us that spoke up and had a question. Why is it that the benefits will take a year to put in place? Dave Healy, it takes the insurance company a year to put them in place. Obviously, that's incorrect, because anywhere else, it's usually a 3-month period. How can we get rid of this union? Scare tactics. Speaker said there's nothing else for the home care workers. We got the best we could get. The speaker was very ignorant and said you can choose to walk away. We were told in Gander that the agreement will go ahead regardless. They're trying to scare everybody. Many home care workers are prepared to quit if this agreement goes ahead, and we will take our clients private. We have a right to be heard and to be understood and to be able to ask questions. And as a female, that it seems like we are being targeted as females, that we don't have a voice, that we're not allowed to say anything. That's totally incorrect. And for Jerry Earl to get on there and say that the importance of us coming to these meetings, it's absurd that they're saying that we're allowed to ask questions, and when we do, we're getting ignorant males speaking to us as if we're dirt under their feet. if we walk away in mass numbers, you'll find out who the backbone of healthcare and who the backbone of this province is, because this province cannot afford to lose all of the very important people that are here for all of our loved ones. Another thing that was said, this contract is pretty much going to go ahead. Told us that if we do not say yes, there will be worse. If we go out on strike, that we'll be mandate back or we'll lose our jobs. Who the hell do Dave Ely think he is? This whole situation has deteriorated so much. We're supposed to have our trust in NAPE because we pay our dues. For me, like, one of the questions is, for years I was paying union dues. I only found out, I'm doing this since 2002, so I only found out in December of 2023 that I was not a registered member. So all of my dues that I paid in bi-weekly, where did those go? How did the financial department of NAPE, categorize those, union dues coming in? What were we listed as, Jane Doe and John Doe?
No, you were just a number. But a couple of very quick questions. Number one, of course, we cannot afford to lose any home care workers, period, for whatever reason. The second point I'll make is nobody at NAPE has any authority about whether or not you lose your job. If you work for an agency, it's up to the agency whether or not you lose your job, not up to NAPE, period. Third.
And it's not right for them to even threaten us.
No, they shouldn't be talking like that because that's inappropriate. One quick question, though. When the conversation regarding benefits and the timeline to implement the benefits, is there not some merit to the fact that it takes insurance companies quite a while to deal with these types of matters? I mean... Well,
if that were correct, Patty, like, say with the daycares, they're going through that right now. And I am, I done early child education. So with them right now, theirs is going to be implemented in 3 months. The average business, they implement within 3 months. So, you know what I mean? Like, I can't possibly, we'd have to talk to the insurance company to find out the policy on that. But, it's the go-around of how they're talking to us and talking down to us. And as women, I find that very triggering. There's no males that are making comments or asking questions, which we're entitled to do, that are being belittled. So if Dave Healy or Jerry Earl has a problem with females, stand up and say that. But I'm going to tell you, here tonight in St. John's, we have our meeting at 7:30 at the Holiday Inn, and that, my friend, is my meeting. And I will be standing up. And if Dave Healy wants to challenge me and he wants to belittle me, he'll be the man sitting down. And I would caution everybody to contact NAPE, make sure you're registered to vote, because between the agencies and between NAPE, it's their responsibility to make sure, because we are unionized, because they are taking our union dues from us, to ensure that we are registered individuals and our vote counts, and they are keeping us in the dark so that we're unable to make that vote. That, to me, don't seem right.
Understood and agreed. And you're not the only one who's been contacting me, whether it be email and or calls. There's a couple of other of your colleagues that are saying they're calling either today or tomorrow, and they have very similar concerns. And they've sent me along some of the snapshots from that Facebook page, echoing what you've told us here this morning, Karina. Anything else before I have to go?
No, just everybody stand together in solidarity, and we're stronger in numbers. And, we have a right to our votes. We have a right to speak, and nobody should be talked down to.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Karina.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Margot and caller on 6. You're both next right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Margot, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for taking my call.
No problem.
Pretty foggy out there still,
It is. Yeah.
It is. I was on my way to the podiatrist this morning. That was approximately about 10 to 9, going across Empire Avenue. And the school bus stopped and, of course, put out their stop sign with their lights flashing. And my peripheral vision saw one car go through, and then I saw an additional 2 cars go through. Now, my question is, are these buses equipped with cameras who can capture these license plates?
They're allowed to. There was an allegation of sexual assault in 2018, and the Privacy Commissioner looked at the concept of cameras on buses and said, yes, they could do it, but was not mandated.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because it should be. My understanding is that it's an immediate 6 points off your driver's profile, and an additional, I don't know if it's between $500 and $1,200 ticket.
That's right.
So all these things, if they were against the people, perhaps they might wake up, because a child could dart across the street trying to catch the bus, and good heavens, there's nothing we can do then.
Well,
and it's all about prevention,
Yeah, 100%. So there is a thought that with the speed camera program being expanded by 10 speed cameras this summer, the next steps we're told is red light cameras. Municipalities have the ability to work with the department, that's Service NL, but also talking about putting cameras on the stop signs that are deployed from the side of the bus. So hopefully that happens, because let's just go to the tape. If you do it, then you get the ticket and you get the demerits, and that's the way it should be.
Absolutely, I fully agree, and I wanted to, because it concerned me so much, I wanted to just call and touch base. I'd like to say another little thing, if you don't mind. June is Indigenous Month, and my understanding is that every business is obliged to help in whatever way they can. And just the past Saturday, on June the 1st, we launched a book in St. George's, and it's by Judith, oh my gosh, I lost her last name now, Doucette, sorry, and it's called The Sacred, it looks like Kitpoo, but there's a little dictionary in the back which gives the pronunciation as Gitboo. And there's a little tiny story in there about Phyllis Getback, and she was the lady who was in a residential school, and she said her prayers to the sacred Gitboo, and they were carried to the Creator's ears, and she was freed. So it was then she started the Orange Shirt Day. But the story is beautiful, and she did a great job. So I'd just like to put that in there and give my regards and blessings to all who enjoy this status.
As a matter of fact, coming up right after the news is the artistic curator with Indigenous Performing Arts on L, so we'll get some information going there as well. I appreciate the time, Margot. Thanks for the call.
No problem. Thank you, Patty, for allowing me on.
Pleasure.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 6. Caller, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty, how you doing?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm all right, I suppose. Wish the fog would clear up, but that's beside the point here now anyway.
I got to mow my lawn. I'm embarrassed. I mean, I was pretending.
Me too, my buddy, me too. My back lawn is a state, and I can't get out there to do it.
I was pretending that I was doing it for the bees in May, no mow May, and now it's got away from me. It's so wet and it's so tall, and honest to God, every time I drive up or down the street, I'm embarrassed to tears about how bad my lawn is. Anyway,
oh, my, it happens. As homeowners, it happens. Hey, boy. The reason I'm calling today, Patty, is I'm a homeowner in the Center City area, and I'm adjacent to Booth Memorial High School, the old high school. That building has been derelict since I bought my house, and before, probably about 10 years now. This spring, once the snow cleared, myself and my neighbor started to notice that there's a lot of people hanging out around there, checking the door, seeing if they could get in. There's rampant drug use on the go over there. There's people shooting up. There's people smoking stuff over there. There's teenagers trying to break into the old gymnasium. The other day, I seen a bunch of teenagers break into the theater. There's an old theater there too, right? There's 2 buildings on that lot, right? There's the gym, and then there's an old theater there. I'm just calling to ask Penny Group, because every time I call them, I get nowhere. What are they doing to secure that building? Because they're doing nothing. Like, they're asking for a lawsuit. One of these days, a bunch of kids are going to get in there, and someone is going to get hurt. And I don't need to tell you, you probably already know, that building right now is a pigeon coop. It is not safe to go in there. The smell coming from the broken windows is stifling on a hot day. You cannot even enjoy being outside in that area because of it. It is ridiculous. The other day, I seen 2 fellas with a wheelbarrow full of tools and they popped one of the side doors and they poked the tools in there. And then later that night, I seen them come back and pop the door and take them and go on. So what are they up to? You know what I mean? Like, there's so much sketchy things happening in that area that, you know, you don't even feel safe in your own home anymore.
Yeah, and some of those abandoned properties, that's long been the case. I mean, you just think back to the Grace Nurses residence. It became the exact same thing. It was just a place for people to go and get high and beat stuff up and whatever else. And, of course, between the rats and the pigeons, they found it to be quite a welcoming home. So I don't know what the state of any security is surrounding it. And, you know, if we're just... Sorry, go ahead.
No, there's no security to speak of. There's nothing. There's no fences, no perimeter fence around that building. There are broken syringes everywhere. Like, you would not walk through the grass over there in your bare feet or with just a pair of canvas shoes on. You know what I mean? Like, you'd have to wear steel toe to go over there. You know, it's just getting to the point that some of my neighbors are talking about selling because of just the racket in the neighborhood, because of what's going on over there, you know. And don't get me wrong, like, people who are addicted to hard drugs, as far as I'm concerned, Patty, they're victims. You know what I mean? Like, they need help. But they're also contributing to just the unease in the neighborhood. You know, it's just not safe.
I understand that in full.
I look out my back window and, you know, there's someone sat in the corner heating up a spoon. Like, that's not right.
No, it's not. Absolutely right. I agree. And this, look, just... I can't speak for you, but when people voice these types of concerns, this is not about demonizing anybody who might have a drug addiction. This is about the reality on the ground.
That's not what I'm trying to do.
Oh, I know you're
not. You know what I mean? Like I see it everywhere. Like, from Freshwater Road in Rabbittown down to Livingstone Street is an open-air drug market. It is. You can walk down the street and you'll have people soliciting you for cocaine and fent and methamphetamines. Like, it's true.
Oh, I navigated. I walked it just to get the experience, well, just a taste of, because I'm in contact with some of the residents in that area, and what they say is absolutely true.
Yeah, no, it is true. Case in point, 2 summers ago, I was walking towards downtown, and I cut down Cabot Street, and I seen a man being assaulted with a baseball bat, and I thought he was dead. I had to call an ambulance because he was hurt really bad. You shouldn't have to see stuff like that happening in your town. You know what I mean? Like, people shouldn't be doing this to each other. Like, what have we become as a society if this is what's going on for the average person who's trapped in the drug trade?
Yeah, and then add to it, the families in those neighborhoods are just trying to get along. They're just trying to go to work and go to school and come home safe and not have to worry every single second of every single day.
Yes, and just get your bills paid and keep the roof over your head. You know what I mean? Just like anybody else in the world, right? But again, I would challenge Penny Group to please do something about that building. You need to either tear it down or you need to secure the perimeter, because right now anyone can walk over there and pop that side door and get into that gymnasium, and they're going to catch some kind of disease. There's asbestos over there. There's guano from the birds. It's just a mess, an absolute mess.
I'm sorry to hear that's happening, and I'm not surprised all the same. Thanks for the call this morning.
No, thank you, Patty. I appreciate it. Thank you for being a voice of reason in times of chaos. We all appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Stay in touch.
Yeah, no problem, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's go and take a break for the news. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1, saying more to the artistic curator with the Indigenous Performing Arts NL. That's Leah Don Helena. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hi. G'day, Patty. How are you today?
Excellent today. How about you?
Oh, I could stand for some sunshine, but other than that, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, me too. So the pronunciation, is it Leah Don?
Leah Don, yes.
Leah Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
What are we talking about this morning?
I would just like to let your listeners know about the Indigenous Performing Arts NL. We're a new professional arts organization. We were formed to create, support, and present Indigenous stories in the area now known as Newfoundland and Labrador, and we have our inaugural event coming up next week.
I actually read about it a couple of days ago. I believe it's called No Indians Here. It's a story of a gentleman named Calvin White.
Yes, Elder Calvin White out of Flat Bay. It's coming up on Tuesday on June 11th. We'll be at the St. John, in the First Light Center for Performance and Creativity in St. John at 7 o'clock. And the reason we're doing this is because it's the 75th anniversary of Confederation this year, as I'm sure most of your listeners know. And there's not really much reason to celebrate in the Indigenous communities for some people.
Can you tell us a bit of the story of Elder Calvin White?
Elder Calvin White, he was born and raised in Flat Bay. He's one of the founders of the Indigenous Revival in Newfoundland and Labrador. He's been involved in advocacy for over 50 years. He helped organize Aboriginal families in the province, in Conn River and on the West Coast, to form what would later be the Federation of Newfoundland Indians. He's a former chief. He's been on national boards, like the Native Council of Canada, Aboriginal Liberal Commission, the National Council of Welfare, and his petitions as one of the original petitioners in 1989 to the government led to the establishment of the Hollyblue Mi'kmaq First Nation Band.
And so how does the performance roll out?
Pardon?
How does the performance roll out? Like, is it in the form of a play, or is it recitations, or what is it?
No, this is going to be a conversation between Elder White and his son, Nelson White, who, as some of your listeners may know, is a very well-known painter who paints Indigenous reflections on activism and things like in the community and things like that. And it'll be a conversation between the two of them around Confederation and the movement by Joey Smallwood to exclude Indigenous people from the terms of Confederation.
Interesting. And who are the performers? Like, do you have a cast of performers that are part of your group? Do you hold auditions for these types of things, or who's involved?
No. This particular evening isn't a performance per se.
No, I shouldn't have used cast. I should have asked, like, is this permanent staff in place, or do you bring people in specifically to deal with specific stories? Because I know later on down the line, I believe sometime in July, Sister Stories is another event coming.
Yes, part of our mandate is to present Indigenous work that already exists. So Shalan Jodri out of Mi'kma'ki, Nova Scotia, is coming in to perform in tandem with myself doing Stolen Sisters. She'll perform her work Gokum, and that'll be on the grounds at Government House later in July. Don't worry, we'll call in to let you know about that too.
Fair enough, and you're welcome to call. And so you're talking about, 75 years of Confederation, and there will be some questions asked by certain individuals, certain segments of society about how it's worked so far. For Indigenous peoples, and you're talking about there's not much to celebrate, even though I don't even know if we're going to celebrate versus commemorate this year. But if you describe high level some of the ongoing concerns for some members of the Indigenous community or First Nations or Inuit or Métis, can you give us some specifics that you think some of the challenges that remain? Because I'm sure there's a laundry list of, but where would you like to start for part of the public discourse here?
I guess just that most people don't know that the terms of union, the omission of Indigenous people from the terms of union was very, I don't want to say calculated, but it was intentional. By excluding our communities from the terms of union, that meant that Canada was not responsible for taking care of their Indigenous people. And so we have been left out and misrepresented and mythologized over the course of the last 75 years in a way that no other province has left their Indigenous people out of the conversation. There are still people in the province who believe that the Mi'kmaq didn't have ancestral homes in Newfoundland, whereas we in the community know that that's not true. So through Calvin White's work, we're able to re-educate people on some of the misunderstandings that they still hold.
Fair enough. Some people, just project these conversations out of hand. Whether we talk about the starting point of reconciliation that comes with an apology, for instance, like every other adversarial issue. Like if I get into a racket with my wife, the first step to getting back on track is an apology. But some people reject that in full, saying, what are we apologizing for? It wasn't me. I wasn't alive when all these things took place. And then all the disjointed negotiation regarding land claims and other rights and the rest of it. The unfortunate reality is, like many of the most difficult and complex conversations, they're over before they begin.
Absolutely. And it's a minefield. Outside of the Indigenous community, within the Indigenous community, we're still feeling the ramifications generations later. There are cultural ramifications, social, emotional. It's a generational trauma that's befallen the Indigenous people in Newfoundland and Labrador. And it's trauma upon trauma. And while it is important to recognize the joy that comes with being Indigenous and the way our lives are relevant to what's going on now, it's also important to recognize that there are people who still benefit from the erasure of our culture. There are still people who are riding on the coattails of Confederation and hailing it as a really good thing, while there are people who were really badly hurt by the terms of union. And I know it's hard for people who weren't there to recognize their part in it, but if people who weren't there when it happened are still being affected by it negatively, then there are people who weren't there who are still being affected by it positively too. And it's not about laying blame, it's about the re-education of people.
Fair enough. While we have you, Leah Don, is there anything else you'd like to tell us before we after the break?
Just that being with Elder Calvin White is an experience. Hearing him talk is a very moving experience. And he has graciously agreed to do a book signing of his book, One Man's Journey, which will be available for purchase at the event and before the event, purchasing tickets online. So the first step to reconciliation may be just listening with an open heart as to what Indigenous people have to say about themselves and for themselves and their own experiences. So if people are looking for a way to connect with the Indigenous community, this could be a really good start.
I appreciate making time. We'll talk again in July.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Leah Don. Take care.
Bye now.
Okay, bye-bye. Leah Don. Helena, Artistic Curator, Indigenous Performing Arts NL. Let's take a break. When we come back, school bus safety, Capeland, whatever you want to talk about, don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 3. Joshua, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How's it going?
Doing okay? How you doing?
Oh, not bad. Possibly slightly better than the weather, but, what else is new?
We're all hanging tough. Hopefully there's a break in the cloud cover and the fog coming ASAP.
For sure. I suppose I could mention a couple different topics, but I'll stick to the school bus safety for now, especially where they had a number of calls yesterday voicing that concern too. I'll just throw my voice with that crowd too. And I'm sure 99% plus, maybe even hopefully 100% of the listening audience can agree with the school bus safety topic anyway. It is frustrating, though, to occasionally see somebody out there, blatantly passing a school bus with their stop sign. But it's also kind of disheartening to hear about, even like I said yesterday from your callers, their stories about how many times they've seen that infraction, live, if you will. But also, I mean, it seems like there could be an argument out there that is suggesting that the penalties are either not enforced or they're just like, that's a big deal. Like if somebody smokes a kid, like that's going to devastate not only those two people, like the child and the driver, but multiple other people, obviously. So I'm on board. I don't want to sound unmerciful, but I'm on board with those who would suggest that the maximum penalty, like $1,200, should be enforced. I'll park it at the moment, Patty, if you want to chime in.
Well, no, I think, enforcement is obviously key. We can have all the rules and laws on the books that we want, but unless they're enforced, they don't have a whole lot of teeth. But now the RNC, when part of the conversation yesterday was unfolding about this issue, the RNC contacted me right away and said, look, we are enforcing it. We're writing tickets for it. And let's hope that those fines are $1,200 every time. Look, I don't even know what constitutes a less serious passing of a school bus. Why would someone get $500 versus someone get a $1,200 fine? So, yes, and I think the enforcement's really going to boil back down to putting those cameras on the stop arms. I really do, because unless that becomes the case, because we do not have an RNC cruiser to follow every school bus all day long.
No, of course not. Was it one of your callers recently, Patty, who mentioned that she was frustrated because she had called in multiple times or emailed the RNC, and even with evidence and video footage, and she was basically disregarded or something? Did I understand that right?
Yeah, that was the summary or the paraphrase of it all. And again, that same question was answered by the RNC during that call, saying, look, we take these things very serious and we will follow up on these fronts. So it's always difficult to know exactly what's what when I'm doing this program live, but I like to think that they take it seriously enough, and by they I mean the RNC, to do whatever is possible here to make sure that these incidences are reduced, because apparently it's really quite prevalent.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess half the population, sometimes leaves a bit late to go to work or wherever. But to pass a school bus with a stop sign out, it's not like you're just rolling through a stop sign, which could technically be an infraction too. But this is kids, right? Like, I don't know if the people if the 1% or less of the population who would go to pass a school bus, I don't know if they're just not parents or if they're not thinking, but surely if they're not parents, they would have like a nephew or a niece. So, how would they feel if their niece was smoked by some maniac driver whose schedule was more important than the safety of children because they wanted to pass a school bus? It's very frustrating when people are just so, like, I suppose there's there might be the scattered person who's, I don't know, ignorant to the rule, but at the same time, that argument could be countered with like, well, you got your license, you should have known the rule, and plus it's a blatant stop sign, and this is, so I don't know if that excuse could even hold any weight, but for somebody to knowingly and intentionally pass a school bus, that to me is downright. I gotta catch myself now. I'm getting riled up. I didn't want to swear, but that to me is downright selfish, and it's disgusting. And I'm not trying to sound too frustrated here, Patty, but we're talking about the safety of kids. I'm a parent myself, and I don't know what I would do if, heaven forbid, anything happened to my little munchkin. But let alone from somebody who knowingly and willingly broke the law. Not the least of which would be to pass a school bus with the stop sign out. So anyway.
And people are going nowhere fast. I mean, if you're just talking about in and around where I live, there's just no way to get anywhere any quicker than anybody else. I mean, you can floor it all you like and dodge in and out of lanes and all the rest of it, but there's a red light down the road, and we're all going to meet each other there. And supposing you are late for something, is being reprimanded by our boss for being literally a couple of minutes late because you had to stop behind a school bus, just weigh the pros and cons. What's the bigger issue here? The safety of the children and or the fact you got to have to say to the boss, sorry about that, it was busy on the road.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to the penalties or how much or whatever, that could be somewhat of an opinion. But what's not an opinion is that the actual rules of the road. Patty, I actually got the driver's booklet opened up here. If you would grant me maybe 25 seconds just to read the short little paragraph.
Go ahead.
Over the airwaves. Because, again, this is not an opinion. This is coming from the Newfoundland Labrador Road User's Guide. It says, meeting or overtaking a school bus, and this is, quote, whenever you approach a school bus that has stopped to pick up or drop off school children and is displaying a visual signal such as flashing lights and a stop sign, you must stop before reaching the bus. This is true whether you are approaching the bus from the front or rear. You must remain stopped until the bus has started up again, or the driver signals you to go, or until the flashing lights and stop sign are deactivated. On a multi-lane undivided highway, all traffic must stop in all directions and in all lanes for a stopped school bus with its lights activated. So, again, it's very common sense to most people, but maybe somebody just needed to hear that the actual rules of the road, because it makes you wonder why some people just choose to blatantly, botch that rule when it comes to the safety of kids. So, I'll park that here fully now. I don't want to go off too much on a rant, but hopefully this point is heard by not only me but a lot of other concerned citizens, and yeah.
Let's just hope that, with this renewed focus on the issue, here we are in the tail end of this particular school year. So, folks, look, if you're listening and you've done this in the past, just for starters, give your head a shake and just ask yourself this question. Do I want to be that person? Do I want to be part of that headline where a kid is struck, badly injured or killed? Because that's not hyperbole. I'm not trying to sensationalize something for the sake of. That's the reality. Little kid versus a big vehicle at the weight of some of these rigs we see driving around. It's a pretty easy calculation to make. I appreciate making time for the show, Joshua.
Thanks, Patty. Talk to you later.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Yeah, amazing stuff. All right, let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to fisheries scientist and FFAW policy and negotiations lead. That's Abe Solberg. Abe, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I should also add, Abe was one of the 3 candidates vying to be the president of the FFAW. Before we get going, Abe, because we're close to the news, if we have to take a break and put you on hold and come back so you can finish your thoughts, is that okay?
That's totally fine.
Okay, Capelin. We've heard from Jack Daly, who is a marine scientist with Oceana Canada. Talk about the fact that the quota has rolled over. I believe it's 14,583 tons, if I'm not mistaken. So what's the union's position on their concerns?
Yeah, well, Patty, at the end of the day, really the union's position is that this decision is anti-science, and in a way that is far different than I think how Jack would describe it. Right? The most recent Cape 1 assessment, what we saw is that Cape 1 is now out of the critical zone. And when a stock is out of the critical zone, it can be fished, it can sustain higher fishing pressure. And we were expecting to allow for that higher quota, understanding that the stock can sustain higher fishing pressure. But that's not what happened here. Instead, they chose to roll over the fishing amount, despite the fact that we now know, the best science is saying to us that the stock actually can withstand more pressure. It's in a cautious zone here, or at least it's not in the critical zone.
The concern there, and I'm still trying to fully grapple with this issue, when DFO simply changes the modeling for assessing the stock, and they move the data point back to 1954 from 1983, but they say at the same time, that doesn't mean there's any more fish in the water. So if that's the case, and we do know that inside the capelin stock, earlier maturation and consequently earlier death, more small fish versus some of the larger capelin that we've seen in years past. So that change in the modeling, the label of critical versus cautious, I don't know how much weight that carries anymore because simply it's a result of changing the way they do the model.
Yeah, well, it's really all about the benefit of hindsight, right? When you look and you say the model starts in 1983 and we don't know what happened beyond that, then we have no way of knowing where the stock had been in the past. And we can learn about the future of the stock based on its past productivity, right? So when you are able to go back and see in hindsight, the stock has been at a similar level to where it is now, and it sustained much higher catches, and it ended up skyrocketing, right, going to those biomasses we saw in the 80s. So we're able to say with confidence that this point we're at is not the ground floor, right? We know that from hindsight of extending the model. So while there's no more fish in the water, we do know that the situation is actually far more, favorable than we initially thought, where our only number that we knew was in the 80s. It was really high, and then it crashed. And now we have, good evidence to say, well, it actually used to be around here. This is historically precedented. We're fine. We have some room here.
And I don't know, this is a legitimate question based on ignorance. Do we have certain variables included? Because, it's one thing to just simply have a measure of the spawning biomass, but things like things we can't control, sunlight and sea ice and phytoplankton and the warming water temperatures, because simply measuring how much fish doesn't really give us a base understanding to compare back to 1955, because a variety of things have changed measurably since 1955.
So you're talking about the cod assessment here, right?
Well, either or, because all of these assessments need to include the forage fish and the the cod recovery, and what we know about warming water temperatures, what we know about the change in historical migration patterns, all those things, because simply counting fish doesn't necessarily tell the entirety of the tale. Or does that question make any sense?
No, it's a difficult question. It makes a little bit of sense. I'll try to answer it the best I can. So we know that there are, obviously variable, what's called life history traits or environmental traits. So some of these change over time, right? Natural mortality in cod varies with time. Sometimes there's a greater natural mortality, sometimes there's less. It depends on what's in the water, what they're eating. It depends on a number of conditions, right? All this sort of gets accounted for in different types of error within a model. So you have your observation error. How much of the model is actually able to, what is being surveyed, how accurate is that? Then you have your process error, which comes from your equations, and it all kind of comes together. So when this model comes out, right, any stock estimate, it's not saying here's a number. It's saying here's the range of probabilities. And we think that, most likely in that 50th percentile, the stock is here. So we account for those things. No one in a stock assessment is saying, well, we need to get this number to the fish, right, or even to be 1,000 pounds. What you're looking at is you're looking at trends and you're looking at broader range. So all that sort of gets subsumed. So you can say that there are certain things, that uncertainty accounts for a lot of that variability over time and allows us to have confidence in these estimates with any type of model. As far as the Cape 1 assessment goes, I think this is something that really needs to be highlighted to a lot of listeners because it might be confusing. Science actually doesn't have any understanding of how many Cape 1 are in the water. Cape 1 does not have a stock assessment. What Cape 1 has is it has an index. So each year they do an acoustic survey over a fixed area, and they say this is our index. And we think that this index is an appropriate indicator for the health of the entire stock, although they really have no idea how big that stock is. They just think that this index tracks it really well, that it's correlated. Now, there's indicators. If you look at the most recent, so with Cape 1, every year of the assessment, what they do is they project what that index is going to be in the next year. And they do that looking at larval condition from past years, looking at sea ice timing, and there's another variable that they use as well. And they say, well, we project based on these conditions, these factors that we've seen to have relevance to that index, that's going to be what the index is. But again, we don't know how many capelin are actually in the water. Then, what we've seen recently and what we saw specifically in this year's assessment is that model that they're using to project the index is starting to stretch further and further and further. It's getting outside of its comfort zone, what's called the residuals. So the difference between the actual value, because, in hindsight, we're able to go back and say, oh, this is what the actual value was. We did the acoustic survey. We know what the index is. And this was our projection from the last year. Those numbers are getting further and further apart. And what that tells us is that maybe the index isn't as appropriate anymore as it used to be. The other alternative is maybe those drivers that we're using to predict the index, so sea ice timing, larval abundance, maybe those aren't as predictive. But either one of those is a massive problem when you're trying to estimate what the health of this stock is, right? So if you want to say that, the model isn't able to do it as much anymore, that's an issue, because what it might mean, and what we're seeing, on the water, what we're hearing from a lot of communities around Newfoundland, is that capelin are moving further north than their zone has been historically, and that is outside of that acoustic index. So when we talk about, the science says that there's not enough capelin in the water, well, science doesn't say anything about how many capelin are in the water. Science says that there's an index, and science says that index at this point would be correlated with capelin being above the critical zone where they can sustain some fishing pressure.
Fair ball. I'm going to put you on hold here now, Abe. We'll come back and talk a little bit of cod.
Sounds good, thanks.
Okay, there we go. Abe Solberg is on hold. Time for the news. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Let's rejoin Abe Solberg, who's a fisheries scientist and FFAW policy and negotiations lead, on line number 2. Abe, you're back on the air.
Hey, Patty.
We'll get through a couple of cod questions here. So it's really the tale of two stocks. If you hear from George Rose talking about northern cod and reestablishing historic migration patterns, and Alberto Weremut at Icewater Foods talking about, bringing back a commercial fishery, whether that be at 25,000 tons or whatever, which would bring, I think, exploitation rate from somewhere around 2% to somewhere around 7%. Where are we going with northern cod?
Yeah, so, all indicators are that the northern cod stock is doing really, really well right now. That we're seeing, especially on the water, especially with the FFAW Sentinel Science Program, we're seeing really high catch rates, really historically sort of back to that kind of when cod was king again here. And that's a really, really good sign for the fishery, for, people in rural Newfoundland and Labrador, for fish processing plants. That's all really good. I do think, that commercial fishery term that you used is, that's a more contentious one, right? It's FFAW's position here that any additional increases in the TAC, and we are certainly expecting them this year, considering the revised status of cod, need to go to the inshore, right? A commercial fishery implies that a certain amount of the catch goes to offshore and a certain amount of catch goes to international in the NAFO zone. And that really is, that would be completely untenable this year. Historically, the DFO and the federal government has promised the first 115,000 tons of cod to inshore harvesters, and we are expecting them to live up to that province and do right by our fishermen.
Yeah, and I think if we're using numbers like 25,000 tons, and even if that word or phrase of commercial fishery is the wrong one, fair enough. But at that total allowable catch, that doesn't include anybody but the insurer. It couldn't.
Well, it does a little bit, actually. I've said this a bunch of times to a number of different people. But effectively, diversified fisheries are healthy fisheries, right? If folks are able to diversify their portfolio, fish more species, it reduces the reliance on one of them. And that does help. That is additional income that can be extremely meaningful. It's additional weeks that can be meaningful for folks' EI. It is good for processing plants. It creates employment. 25,000, no, it's not a huge quota by any means, but it is a helpful one. Those increases are very meaningful to these communities. And it's important that DFO realizes that in all of their management decisions, right? They can't just focus on stock status, but they need to also consider the sustainability of the industry and the communities that rely on it.
And some of the work that's done with cod and processing plants, say for instance in Iceland, they seem to maximize the product just a little bit more. Even if we're talking about it, I'm not suggesting that we should open up fish stick plants, but they just do different things, like with the head and a variety of other parts of the cod. We just kind of go with a bit of head off and gut it. I know cheeks and tongues and the like are also part of the chain, but anyway, before we run out of time, the tale of the northern cod is one thing, but the stories and the science coming out with the Gulf cod stock is devastating. We're talking about commercial extinction.
That's right. Yeah, that's one where we are, like you said, it is a tale of two stocks, and that is a really, really troubling situation that we're seeing there. And in the Gulf also, one of the things that they're saying specifically about it is that it's likely caused by the prominence of seals, right, and seal predation. And that's a huge issue because, as we talked about, I think the first time I was on chatting with you about seals, DFO in the Newfoundland and Labrador region really hasn't done the work yet to know how much impact that might have, and that's an issue for our stock on the West Coast. This is going to be a problem going forward for a number of different species, and it is really it's terrible what's happening right now in the Gulf, certainly.
Yeah, I've never really understood DFO when they talk about the Gulf stocks and they talk about the predation regarding gray seals, and they've acknowledged that that's a problem, but not so much with the northern cod stock. I've just never really understood why a predator is a predator in the Gulf but not off the coast, on the East Coast.
I think what it has more to do with is the historical range of gray seals and the number that are there relative to the stock. One of the things that DFO, that actually FFAW Science is working with DFO to do, one of the projects that we're quite proud of, is spending more resources to document seal distribution. Because right now, what DFO knows of seal range is relatively limited, and it's stuck back to the early 2000s, basically. They have not had an update on where seals actually are, and that influences their sampling program, right? If you're going to go, you're going to sample, see how many seals are there so you can do your assessment, well, you're going to go to where you think that seals are, and if that's based in the early 2000s, then you're stuck there. So one of the things that we really need to do is re-up those baselines, show people that, no, this is the distribution now. That distribution has changed, and that will give us a lot more information going forward to actually figure out how many seals are there and what impact they're having.
Fair enough, Abe. I appreciate your time. Good luck in your chase to be the president.
Thanks so much, Patty. I appreciate the conversation. I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Abe.
Bye.
Bye-bye. It's Abe Solberg, fisheries scientist with the FFAW. Let's see here. Let's check in on the Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. You can follow us here. Email address is openline@vocm.com. Our favorite, of course, when you join us live on the air, just like Mike, who's in the queue to talk about one of the MHAs. I believe there's a bouquet coming. And then talking about who's going to be the next CEO of NL Health Services. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 4. Mike, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Morning.
Paddy, I'd like to compliment Jeff Dwyer. He's my MEJ. And of all the politicians and everything that I've talked to and everything that I've done about the Commerce Group and whatever and brought the highlights to it, he's the only politician who sat down and he came to my place on a Sunday morning, and we went through, I think it was about 3 hours of going through the Compass contract, so that I was making these accusations, very serious statements and that and stuff. And he said, okay, he showed me, we went through the contract. And he had to agree because it's written there in black and white that everything that I said is true. And he's basically done whatever he could. And then when I brought Eastern Health to court, he was the only politician, only MHA, I think, that they said into the court that ever went there to support a constituent. And he's there now. He's trying to help this fellow that the Marine Department's tried to put bankrupt, tried to get him paid, to get it straightened out. And he's done stuff over and beyond, what his requirements are, or what he's doing. So there's many things there now, but he's a man who basically checks out what he says. And like I said, now I reached out to a lot of politicians, and as far as I know, he's the only politician who ever looked into properly the Compass contract to go through it. And, it's a pity that there's not more politicians like him. Like I said, when somebody makes the claims, the very serious claims, the politicians should pay heed and say, look, either show it to us or shut up. And, or back it or whatever. But neither another politician has really gone through to put the efforts into it that he has. And they should. It's their duties. Look at our health care and the situation that it's in. Now, to go on with that is that now Dave Diamond is going, Tom Osborne is going. They're the ones that got us into these contracts. They're the ones now that are being investigated being investigated. People are doing a lot of stuff to try to get the proof, the actual. They know what's going on, but they got to have the actual proof before the claims are all made. But there's stuff there like inside trading and that and everything. A contractor within our government who knows everything that's going on and taking all the contracts for different companies and that stuff. All of this stuff is going on right under our noses. And with all of this stuff, you and him, I'd say, are after putting the most interest into this and trying to do something about it. We don't have a investigative reporter. They don't have the money to put into do a thorough investigation. None of the media do. We're lacking everything as regards to bringing this to highlights to the people. And, we're basically in dire troubles. And who's going to take over from Tom Osborne and Dave Diamond, knowing their history and knowing what's going on behind the scenes as regards to investigation and everything to these contracts that they're into? There's some serious charges that are pending on what comes out of these investigations. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the reason why they're going. Because they know the writing is on the wall as regards to what's going to come out into the open when this stuff is all finished. And especially when the PCs get in. I can't see the PCs not getting in on the next election.
What investigations? Who's investigating it?
Politicians and that, whatever, people behind the scenes in government and other people, other organizations and that. I've been talking to them all, right from, everybody practically that's got anything to do with it, including the police. I've had investigations done by the police, but getting the information, that stuff is very difficult. But our healthcare is in serious trouble. And in order to do it, I don't know who. Now the Premier is involved into it because he knows what's going on now. He inherited it. And he never put it there. But it's there, but he's done nothing to actually do something about it. And until he does something about it now, and, I don't have a clue. I've talked to a number of politicians, ex-politicians, and that, and whatever about this. And nobody knows of who would be the logical choices for either of these positions.
I don't know, but I don't have a whole lot of faith in government investigating government and anything coming from it.
No, but there's other things there too. Some stuff that I can't go into, like there's lobbyists involved. And summer homes down in Florida, there's a lot of stuff going on that I can't comment very much onto. Just usually there is a lot of stuff going on. And behind the scenes, because, like I said, getting the actual evidence of what's going on, like they formed a company. A company was formed with inside information for get some of the contracts and that and stuff with lobbyists and that and whatever. And then people, rich Newfoundlanders, starting up this company a year ahead of time, knowing what was going on with the nursing situation and everything. So there's a lot of stuff there that if it's ever all gets out to the public, the Liberals will be lucky to stay in Newfoundland, let alone win the election.
Well, on the travel nurse issue, that's going to be in the hands of the Auditor General, so I imagine we're going to find out a lot on that front. And any subcontract...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's it. That's all I had. Go ahead. I'll give you the final thoughts.
Well, like I said to the vice president, I think president now of Eastern Health, one day that they wouldn't give me information. I said, well, I'm going to go to the Auditor General. And he put a dirty grin on his face. He said, we don't care about the Auditor General. That was his very words to me. And these people of what's there, because it's very limited to what the Auditor General can do with regards to, they can only look at the records. They can't do an investigation. In order for them to do an investigation, they got to call in the police to get them to do the investigation if they see they get enough evidence to warrant it and work together on it.
Yeah, that's how things work.
The Auditor General on their own can only look at the documents to see what's written down and what's recorded. And a lot of this stuff, you're going to have an awful job to get the information just by digging. The way it's set up, is not in the best interest of Newfoundlanders.
Appreciate the topic and the time, Mike. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
And, of course, David Diamond stepping down. Karen Stone as the interim CEO at NL Health Services. Who's going to be the next permanent one? We don't know. And the next Minister of Health Community Services after Tom Osborne is out in full, which I think happens next month. Don't know. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Ian Foster. You're on the air.
Hey there, Patty. How's it going?
Doing okay. How you doing?
Excellent. Calling in today to mention a couple of release events that are happening this weekend, Patty. I'm releasing a new record called Nerve, and Saturday night, 8 p.m. at Bannerman Brewery, we're doing a ticketed event. You can get tickets at Fred's Records or through my website, ianfoster.ca/nerve. And also we're doing a little 1 p.m. in-store at Fred's Records on the Sunday, the 9th, and that's for all those with, young kids who couldn't get out on the Saturday night. So that's just a walk-in event.
2 pretty cool intimate settings as well, and I've been to performances at both.
Yeah, absolutely. They're both special in their own way and both very different. Like the Saturday, we've got, it's the bigger show. We've got Jing Shaw opening, who's excellent. Bunch of special guests, Nancy Hines, Nick Coltis-Clark, the Ballast Collective. And then the Sunday is that sort of shorter, intimate 30-minute set. But, let's face it, like music in a record store, live music in a record store is pretty fun.
100%. And, of course, Fred's is beyond a record store. It's a big part of the music industry in this province, I would suggest.
Huge, yeah, and I mean it's one of the only places you can go to still buy physical music, and I should say I'm stoked for this one actually. After all the records I put out, this is my first one on vinyl, so Fred's is going to be the main place to pick one of those up.
How many did you press?
Just 200, which is shockingly expensive, Patty. Vinyl is a pretty wild thing. Everyone talks about it coming back, and I think in ways it has, relatively speaking. But it's still a tricky fledgling format in the digital world we're in now, I think.
Yeah, I've gone back. We're playing a lot of vinyl at our house, which was a great Christmas gift I got a couple of Christmases ago. So good luck, break a leg at these particular events. Before I let you go, and I think you have an interesting suggestion about 6 more weeks of fog.
You saw as I waited in the queue my Facebook post there. Yes, I'll sort of paraphrase it here. I don't have it in front of me, but I was basically suggesting, we have various sayings. Of course, everyone knows that the groundhog sees a shadow, 6 more weeks of winter. I think we need, obviously, a St. John specific one for all this fog we're in. So I'm proposing for all the listeners out there, when Patty Daly has to tell a caller to open line to turn off their radio because it's feeding back, 6 more weeks of fog. I fear that we'll never get out of the fog, though, Patty. That's the concern there.
Perpetual fog bank, if that's going to be the measure. Good stuff, Ian. Congratulations on the new record and break a leg.
Thanks a million, Patty.
You're welcome, sir. Bye-bye. There you go. I read that. I thought that was pretty funny. All right. Pretty good show here today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, all of the callers, listeners, emailers, tweeters. You're all right. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.